Well, the first thing it does is that when you vape, it causes quite an intense inflammation along the airways of the lung. It can then also cause inflammation in the air sacs, the alveoli, and then long term that chronic inflammation causes damage to the cells, which can have potentially some long-lasting effects on lung health. There is some evidence coming through already that it impairs the way that the lungs can handle infection. There is some evidence that it causes a more rapid decline in lung function. So there is some evidence that it causes about 5 times the annual loss of lung function that we get with aging. So these are significant changes that it induces. We have an enormous capacity within our lungs. We can do a lot of damage to them before it starts having an effect. But why we have that is because as we age, we lose lung function with the aging. And so if you've done the damage to your lungs in early life, when you get that aging effect, you suddenly find that you're compromised in the second half of your life, basically, and you're forever short of breath. Well, 95% of it is pretty basic. You know, 95% of it is the water, the propylene glycol, the vegetable glycerin, which are relatively harmless parts of it. But then there's all the additives, which are the flavorings and the nicotine and things like that. And then the whole thing with vaping is then you combine these liquids together over a really hot heating coil, and that actually changes the chemical composition of all the molecules, and that suddenly releases a whole lot of new chemical compounds into the lungs, many of which we have no idea what it's going to do to the lungs long term. Yeah, look, this is where there's a lot of concern these days, and this is partly driven by the fact that with the vaping products you can actually get much higher concentrations of nicotine than are ever found in cigarettes. And by using these vapes, our youth today are exposing their brains to much higher levels, and there's major concerns within the pediatric field of the effects of the nicotine on that developing brain. Concern is coming from the pediatricians and the pediatric psychiatrists, a lot of mood disorders associated with the effects of nicotine on the brain, as well as effects on cognition, the thinking patterns. Yes, yeah, definitely. Even the ones without nicotine, because of those changes in the chemicals that are being inhaled, it will cause damage. By far, the biggest damage we're seeing so far at the moment are the ones that also contain nicotine. There is some good evidence now in animal models that the nicotine-containing ones do induce a higher risk of lung cancers. Which is a very worrying signal that we're getting in our mice models. What we know from smoking is, you know, when you've been a smoker once, even though you stop, your risk of things like lung cancer drop off over time, but it never returns to the baseline of that which you'd have if you'd never smoked at all. And the same will be true with vaping as well. The effects will drop off over time once you stop, but again, you'll never return to what you would have been if you hadn't done any damage to your airways. It has a number of acute things on the lungs. We know from studies that people who vape have high incidences of cough, sputum production, wheeze and shortness of breath. We know for a fact that, you know, people who vape will get more short of breath when they're doing things. It may be alright at rest and just minor things, but if you then stress them, like if they're playing sport, we know that vaping impairs sport performance. I mean, I've had a number of patients who find that the vaping is as addictive, if not even more addictive actually, than what they've previously had with cigarette smoking. And people, yeah, and the nature with addiction is they just feel trapped and they can't seem to break it. it makes me very uncomfortable with the fact that it's just so widely available in the community. You bring up the question of the effects of vaping and helping people quit. The important things to remember is that those studies were in a selected group of highly motivated people who were as part of a wraparound service. These weren't just buying vapes from the store. There is no evidence that widespread community availability of vaping helps in any way reduce overall smoking rates. There is a mixture, so I'm seeing a lot of people who have been smokers, and I must say by far the majority of smokers give up cold turkey without any of our supports, and that is still the most common way, and people still give up today. I see some of them who have tried vapes and have done so successfully. There are a small number who have done that successfully, but there are others who find that they are caught in this addiction with the vaping, and then there are others who potentially are doing themselves even more harm by combining the vapes with the cigarette smokes. Why I say that is because the evidence is clear that vaping causes damage in the airways through different mechanisms to traditional cigarette smoking. And we know that, so if you can then combine the two of them, you are potentially long-term going to be doing yourself even more harm. I have been asked to do a number of talks at things like university hostels actually, and in that I'm always surprised at the amount of feedback that I get from the students who are there saying how addicted they are to vaping, how they got into it thinking it was just going to be fun, and how they just can't break that habit now. And so that obviously is a big concern, because I feel for them because they do feel trapped. The concentrations of nicotine that they're getting are really high, and they are completely unaware of how addictive it is. Look, it's really hard, but you can do it. Obviously, stopping completely will cause a number of withdrawal effects, and you will have that craving to return to it. But just like we've learnt from smoking and how the majority of people who stop smoking still do it cold turkey, it is possible. But for those who are really struggling, what I suggest to them is that they actually pay attention to how much nicotine is in the vaping product, and then work out how they can then step that degree of nicotine down over time, so they get less and less of that nicotine effect gradually, and then that gives them the ability, once it's really at low levels, to say, actually, I can stop this now. Yeah, look, what I'm really concerned about is the health of our young people. I know that the vaping shops are situated in places where it will attract the young people. I know that the young people are being attracted by it. We've got escalating rates of use of vapes in the schools in New Zealand. I get contacted all the time, concerned from schools about their vaping rates. So I'm majorly concerned that what we're seeing is a new generation of people addicted to a substance. Oh, the research was done by the Australian National University, and it was a major undertaking of review of all vaping and e-cigarette literature, and really they're of the opinion that these are potentially very harmful products, that they need to be strongly regulated, that they do cause damage to the lungs, to the cardiovascular system, and to the developing brain, and that we need to be very, very careful. Absolutely no surprises actually. All it's done is reconfirm our concerns about vaping, that it does damage the airways, that there is a strong likelihood of long-term complications as a result of them. And so no surprises at all. There are some burns associated with the devices. They do generate a very high temperature. There's been the odd ingestion by toddlers that have caused death, and we also know that some of the nicotine products contain a really high concentration of nicotine, which have been associated with increased incidence of seizure activity and things like that. Yeah. Yeah, well, the respiratory professional community are highly concerned about vaping. I was part of a large Thoracic Society review panel in which we reviewed almost 4,000 studies, and then we published it back in 2019 saying it's our opinion that these are not safe consumer products. There is some a small amount of evidence that in a properly supported smoking cessation service, they may help some people quit, but the potential damages from it far outweigh any potential gains we might get from that from widespread community availability. That's a great question, something that we may not know for many years. My gut feeling is that just like smoking, there is no safe level. I think that that's where we'll end up with vaping as well. It just may take many years for that information to be available. I personally, as a respiratory specialist, I would support the view that nicotine should be removed from them completely. And then nicotine could be added to them as a prescription, as part of a smoking cessation service where it's dedicated to try and help these people give up. But I think in terms of widespread community use, why even expose our youth to that? Some people say, oh, you know, youth will always experiment with something. Then sure, if they're going to experiment with something, let's make it at least something that they're not going to get addicted to. Something that they could actually choose to give up easy. Well, I think that vaping products are clearly marketed for a new generation. Vaping companies came into New Zealand saying their sole focus was to help smokers give up. I think their marketing says completely different. They're after a new generation of addicted individuals. They're after a new generation of vapers. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's been a large number of studies now following youth over a long period of time, which clearly demonstrate that youth who vape are 3 times more likely to go on to smoke cigarettes. And these are not necessarily always youth who you would have thought were high likelihood of going on to smoking long term. So again, it demonstrates that there is a gateway effect going back the other way from vaping through to cigarettes. And I think personally that we should get rid of them from the corner stores and from places where youth can buy them and get addicted.